Welcome to prayer and pose. Let's get breathing. We're going to come onto our backs. Comfortable position. If you've got a bad back, maybe you'd like to put a pillow underneath of your knees. Kind of do any wiggling you need to do to feel comfortable. And then let's take the hands to the belly. We're going to start with a 3-part breath. Inhaling fully, big inhale that we feel at the belly. And then let that fill so that you notice we're filling up with air to the bottom of the chest. And then all the way to the top of the chest. And then we're going to reverse that. Exhaling, top of the chest, bottom of the rib cage, belly. Every time a big inhale, every time we want to lengthen that exhale to be at least as long as that inhale was, noticing those 3 parts, the belly, the bottom of the rib cage, top of the chest with every inhale, every exhale. Continue to breathe with purpose, really challenging your breath here while I talk to you a little bit about David, the author of Psalm 23. Now, when we think about a king, usually we think about somebody who probably doesn't have a clue what it's like to live outside of the luxury of a palace. But that wouldn't be true about David, who was the king of Israel and the author of Psalm 23. David had done a lot of things. He had been a musician. He had been a soldier. He had even spent some time on the run from the authorities. But most notably here, he was a shepherd. So when David is writing Psalm 23 that talks about how the Lord is my shepherd, he doesn't have this romanticized view of farming. He really knows what it takes for a shepherd to take good care of its flock, how they're a fierce protector of them, and what challenges they may have, and just that deep, deep love that a shepherd has for his sheep. Now, if we go back to a time when David was young, there was a new king needed in Israel. So Samuel, the prophet at that time, is sent by God to look for this king. God sends him to the family of Jesse. And he asks Jesse to bring out all of his sons, and he starts looking for this king, one by one, not the one, not the one, not the one. He goes through 7 sons. And then Samuel's kind of frustrated. He feels like this is where God sent him. What is going on? He asks Jesse, are there not any other sons? Because it's not these guys. And Jesse says, oh, well, there is, but he's out with the sheep. David is completely discounted as even coming to see the prophet Samuel when he comes. They just leave him out with the sheep, thinking very little of him and his potential. So they come get David. He does get anointed as king. But this was pretty normal for that time. In this culture, if you had a farm, the first son that was born would take on some farming responsibilities, and then you would pass on the shepherding to the next son. Then the next son is born, and this went on and on until the very youngest son became the official family shepherd. So in the family's eyes, David's future had been laid out for him already. He was going to be a shepherd. This wasn't the first time that we see David being discounted, not believed in, maybe thinking, hey, over here, see me. Later, just one chapter later in the book of 1 Samuel, we see that the nation of Israel is being threatened by a giant from the Philistines. And David looks at these frightened soldiers and this defeated this defeat that is going on in his nation. He says, what in the world? He says, we serve God. We lack nothing. We can get this guy. And so he offers to fight, young boy. And his brothers, again, discount him. No, David, you can't do that. And think he's just full of crazy ideas. And David doesn't listen. He goes and he talks to the king. And the king is like, I'm sorry, I don't think you understand here. This is a seasoned soldier. You can't do this. But David talks to Saul about his time as a shepherd and what a fierce protector a shepherd is of his sheep. He describes how he has fought bears and lions to protect his sheep. And David conquers Goliath famously. You perhaps know that. Now, maybe you feel like David once in a while. Maybe you feel not seen, discounted, just as David did with his family. Then you can probably relate to this Psalm 23 that he wrote when David looks to his shepherd, his fierce protector, and he says this, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Let's extend those legs out long. Coming to a flexed foot position, drawing those toes towards us. Take those hands and let's place them back on the belly. We're going to lift just the head, nothing else. Lift the head. Take a peek at those toes. Now, did you feel that your abdominals were working here? We're going to hold this, noticing that the core is involved here, which is interesting. All we're doing is flexing the neck. So why do we feel the core working here? Because it's stabilizing your rib cage and your hips. And I say that just to point out how important our core is. If someone is paralyzed and it affects their abdominal muscles, they actually can't lift their neck because of what's required of the core in order to lift that neck. We can lower that head down. Let's take our legs to a bent knee position. We can just kind of swish them back and forth like a windshield wiper, loosening up the hips and getting a little bit of rotation to our low back here. So our core is very important, and as we do our session today, we want to do two things that we've done already. We want to make sure that we're breathing and that we're really focused on our breath being deep, long, big inhale, big exhale. And also, I want to make sure that we initiate with the core and that we keep that core involved. Let's draw those knees in towards the chest, rocking it out just to get a tiny little massage here, and then we'll come onto all fours, starting to move into some cat-cow in a second, but first, let's take care of our wrists. We're going to place those hands right underneath of the shoulders, knees underneath of the hips, and then let's gently rock back and forth, not to a place of pain in the wrist, just to a place where we can feel a little bit of a stretch. Now we can rotate those hands to be out, back and forth, just a couple of times, nothing extreme here. Take them inside slightly. And then we can sit back and just gently come this direction. Maybe you're here, but just enough to feel a little bit of a stretch. Again, we never move from a place of pain. We always want to just come to where we feel a nice stretch. Let's give them a little circle. And then we're going to come onto all fours again. Fingers spread wide, pressing the fingertips into the mat. And we're going to inhale, drawing the heart forward, the tailbone back, extending through the neck, not taking that head back to an awkward position there, but really extending. We don't want to overextend that neck. And then we'll exhale as we come into cat. Inhaling cow, exhaling cat, feeling this run all the way from the top of the head to the tip of the tailbone. Now the reason that we really want to think about the neck here is that our thyroid and parathyroid are going to be worked here when we really focus on extending that neck nice and long, which is going to help our metabolism. Yay. Think about every vertebrae working here. This is part of our spinal warm up where we're getting extension and flexion. We're keeping the core activated. As you think of that cow, think about not dropping your udders, but keeping the core activated. Notice the shoulder blades here as we come into cat. They're closer together. And then as we round that back coming into cow, or round that back coming into cat, they're going to spread nice and wide. Now we can come back to neutral, keeping our hips exactly where they are, not raising them at all. We're going to come into a spinal balance. We're going to extend the right leg behind us without moving the hip. Imagine there's a basketball balancing on your hips as we extend the leg out. So there's a dynamic tension happening here where the hip is staying level with the other hip, keeping that basketball on our back, but we're extending and lifting the leg lifted, hip even. We've got a flexed foot. We're pushing that hip towards the wall behind us. And now we can raise that opposite arm, kind of like a handshake, palm in. If we're having trouble balancing, then you can come up on that rear toe. But we still want to be balancing that ball. We want to make sure that our hand is right in front of the shoulder and we're reaching. We don't just come into a pose in yoga, we have to activate it. And here we've got an activation where we've got somebody pulling on the hand and someone pulling on that foot, stretching it out as far away as possible. We're in alignment here with our shoulder over the wrist, with our knee underneath of the hip, flat back. Maybe too, we want to think about how flat we are from the underside, as if somebody just kind of pulled a board underneath of us to try to flatten everything out. Breathing. And then we're going to drop that. We're going to shift back to our hips. Just a relaxed right hand, drop the head, and then take that left arm and reach forward. So we did some flexion and extension to the spine, but we want some lateral extension. We want to feel like we're creating some space down the side of the spine, reaching directly overhead with the shoulder. And now that that's nice and warm with some space created down the side, we can lengthen just a little bit more down the side by moving that left hand towards the right. You can even kind of push the rib cage out a little bit if you'd like. Now, big inhale, big exhale. As we breathe here, notice how it creates space on that inhale between each of the vertebrae. We want to feel that, notice that. And let's come back to all fours. Once again, thinking about keeping those hips exactly over the knees, not lifting any higher as we do lift the left leg. Keeping it in line with the hip right behind us. If we need to, we can come up with that toe for balance. Foot is flexed, reaching it towards the wall behind us, extending that right arm, palm in like a handshake, but not just a lifted arm, reaching, keeping those fingertips as far away from the heel as we can. Gaze is downward, want to avoid that hyperextension of the neck. Breathing here. You might even want to count your breaths to make sure that we don't have a longer inhale than our exhale. The exhale can be longer than the inhale, but it can actually bring a sense of calm if we do make the exhale longer. But we don't want that inhale to be longer than the exhale. So maybe you're inhaling 4, exhaling 4, or inhaling 4, exhaling 6. It's one way to check in on that breath. Holding the pose, never holding our breath. And then let's sit that back to the heels. This time dropping the head, resting that left arm, extending the right arm, reaching till we feel that space being created down the side. And coming a little deeper into this lateral extension as we take that right hand towards the left. Maybe kicking that rib cage out just a little bit. Breathing and noticing how the spine reacts to our breath here. Head relaxed. And let's come back onto all fours for a little rotation. Now first, I want us to really think about the tension that we're going to create, dynamic tension between the hip and the belly button, because the belly button is where we're initiating this here. We're going to take our hand to the hip, make sure it stays nice and stable, and turn the belly button, letting your gaze follow, and then come back. Other side, feeling that hip stays stable, drawing the belly button back, followed by the head. And now you can continue like that if you've got a bad shoulder, but if you're able, let's inhale up, exhaling down. Continuing with our spinal warm-up as we alternate sides, replacing that hand to be right underneath of the shoulder. At the end of our session, when you go through our day, I'm hoping that you feel like you'll stand a little taller, because we really are taking some time here to make sure that we move that spine in all directions in our warm-up. Here with rotation, with our reaches, some lateral flexion. With our cat-cow, we got some extension and some flexion. Moving with our breath, inhaling up, exhaling down. And now let's open up those legs nice and wide, widen the knees, big toes kissing. We're gonna come down into a child's pose. Let that head rest. I'm gonna bring mine up a little bit just because I'm talking to you. I don't wanna talk into the floor, but let that head rest. Your head weighs about 11 pounds, which is like a bowling ball. and your nervous system stays activated all day, holding up this bowling ball. So take this opportunity for restoration. Let that head hit the mat, and let's breathe. This is a great time to start our time of prayer. Let's come into a prayer of adoration to our great shepherd Jesus. Adoration is a little bit different than Thanksgiving, and that we're praying, telling God how great he is, that he is our shepherd, that he is our provider, that he is all-knowing, all-powerful. Whatever quality it is of God that just really hits you today, praise him for that, and breathe. And let's shift forward to a plank, taking the hands underneath of the shoulders. If this is hard, we can come down to the knees, but we want to make sure that we've got a good alignment here where we've got the wrists right underneath of the shoulders. What we want to be feeling happening here is the effect of gravity as it tries to pull the whole back body down, and then we try to keep it lifted using the muscles of the core. Breathing, holding the movement, never holding the breath. Our fingers spread nice and wide. Trying to create a straight line from the shoulders down to the feet. And let's shift back to down dog. Head hanging between the biceps. We're going to inhale, bending the knees. Exhale, straightening. Now, how straight does our spine feel here? If we have tight hamstrings, there might be this tendency to really round the back, but we want to straighten out the spine here. It's okay to have a bend in the knee. We're drawing the heels towards the mat, but maybe not reaching them, and that's okay. Put as much of a bend in the knee as you need to be able to have a nice straight back. And let's walk our feet forward. Inhaling up, feet right under the hips, coming to heart center. Let's pause here for a time of thanksgiving. First, we're just going to check in with our alignment though. Let's make sure those feet are underneath of the hips. Draw those shoulders back and down away from the ears. Palms forward. Notice if they're like this, there's this tendency to close off the chest. Here we get a little more back extension. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes and let's just breathe that prayer of thanksgiving, thanking God for whatever blessings you got going on today. Maybe it's the big stuff, or maybe it's just a little thing like the Amazon delivery driver who brought your package, or the author who wrote your book. And let's inhale, circling up, exhaling, forward fold, and then rising just to where we bring those hands to the shins into a standing half monkey, flattening out the back, extending the neck out, feeling a little stretch in the hamstrings here. Now this is a pose that you can come into anytime that we come into a forward fold. If that forward fold feels like something you need to modify, this is a great option. So you can stay here, or you can drop down with me to forward fold. Let that head hang down. Feel a lengthening of the neck here. We do not want to lock out the knees here. We want to protect the back by allowing there to be a good bend in the knee. We're feeling a stretch down the whole back body here. An openness of the back, release of the neck. Letting that head hang heavy. Being at our place between easy and hard, that place where we don't feel pain, but we do feel a nice stretch. We want to feel this in the belly of the hamstrings. We don't want to feel it in the knee. If we're feeling it in the knee, then we can ease up just a little bit. Now, working from the knee, let's put a little bend in the knee, pushing off, lifting up, and sinking into chair. Now, if we're pregnant or if we have high blood pressure, let's keep our hands right here at heart center. Otherwise, let's challenge ourselves by bringing those arms up by the ears. We're going to lift the toes so that all of our weight kind of comes back to the heel, and then gently place them down We're pushing the hips back. If we were to take a look down, we do want to be able to see our toes here. Now maybe our arms are lifted here, and if our shoulders hurt coming any higher, then keep them low, but as we lift here in a strengthening pose, finding a depth where we do feel the legs strengthening, but again, not a place of pain. If it hurts our knees to come down this deep, let's just come up a little bit. Breathing, strengthening. And staying in chair, let's just alternate lifting our heels. And if you'd like, you can try lifting both heels at the same time. And drop that down. Staying in chair, let's take our hands to heart center. Rotating from the belly button. We rotate. Maybe you'd even like to come down, rest on that leg. But if we do, make sure that we've kept our knee in line with hip, that we haven't shoved that leg over. Also, look at that tendency to bring the hands over to the shoulder. Keep them at the center. That's going to help this work stay from the belly. We can take our gaze up. Maybe you'd even like to advance by opening the arms, breathing, keeping those legs activated, still pushing those hips back. When we're in a twist like this, it's very detoxifying, great for the lymph system, great for digestion. Staying in chair, don't move that lower body. Let's return to the center and shift to the left. Belly button moving back, followed by the gaze. Maybe making that decision to open the arms. Breathing. Still doing that 3-part breath. You might notice it's a little more challenging to breathe in a rotation. That's good. Challenge yourself. Let's come back forward. Taking those arms up, circling back down into forward fold, and then lifting into airplane. Soft knees, not gonna lock those knees out. Notice my palms are up, and then the arms are close to the body. We don't wanna be out here. We're gonna better activate those triceps when the arms are nice and close. And we can drop down again. Let's inhale up, exhaling forward fold. Stepping back with that right foot nice and long into a low lunge. Lifting, taking our hands forward, shifting that left foot back, coming into child's pose, coming forward to a modified plank, then dropping the torso no lower than the elbows, keeping the elbows nice and close to the body, then coming all the way down. Let's lift our hands just to make sure we're not using them to push off, because we're going to use the back muscles here, extending the neck forward, and then lifting, drawing those shoulder blades back towards the heels, and then coming back into child's pose. Let's take our right foot forward, coming once again into lunge, taking our hands to the mat, stepping up, inhaling up, exhaling chair. Let's circle up, back to forward fold. Stepping back with that left foot, low lunge, lifting the arms, taking those hands back to the mat, coming back into child's pose, forward, modified plank, dropping no lower than the elbows, all the way down, pushing off with the power of the back, not the hands, as we lift into cobra, coming back into child's pose. Here in child's pose, we have an opportunity to do a prayer of confession. 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So let's come into a child's pose here, breathing, praying, searching our heart. And now we can lift, drawing that left foot forward, coming back into that low lunge. Hands return to the mat, stepping forward, inhaling up, exhaling chair. Now we're gonna advance our sun salutations to include down dog, up dog, but you can repeat what we just did with the child's pose, cobra, modified crocodile. Let's inhale up, exhaling, forward fold. Stepping back with that right foot, lifting into lunge. Taking our hands to the mat, stepping back into down dog, coming forward to plank or to modified plank, down to crocodile or modified crocodile, coming down, and this is really important. Bring your hands to the bottom of the rib cage. It's gonna cause our alignment to be right in up dog, lifting into up dog. Curl those toes under, coming back to down dog. Draw that right foot forward, coming into lunge. Hands return to the mat, stepping forward, inhaling up, exhaling chair. Inhaling up, exhaling forward fold. Stepping back with that left foot, coming into lunge. Drawing our hands back down to the mat, pushing back to down dog, forward to plank or modified plank, crocodile, dropping down, hands return to the bottom of the rib cage, and we lift into up dog. Curling the toes under, drawing back to down dog. Then if you need to actually use your hand assist to get that leg up, that's okay. Do that. Coming back into lunge with that left foot forward, taking our hands to the mat, stepping up, inhaling up, and coming into lunge. Chair. Let's bring our hands up. Inhaling. Feeling a good extension of the back. Exhaling. Coming back to neutral, let's draw those hands down to the mat. We're going to step that right foot back nice and far, creating a lot of distance between the legs, opening up to that long edge of the mat, and then dropping down. Let's keep our hips in line with the heels, letting the head hang down. And maybe we need to use a block here. We can use a block here. There's a lot of things we can do. We can come to the hands, or we can come down to the forearms, whatever our place is between easy and hard. Soft knees. Feeling a stretch down the hamstrings. Letting that head hang down. As that head hangs down, we have an opportunity to create space between the vertebrae and the neck. Straddle is an interesting pose, standing straddle, because our neck is down below the heart, making this an inversion. All right, let's walk our hands towards the front of the mat, turning that left foot to face the front. Then we're gonna leave that back foot turned. We wanna come into a position where we've got the knee over the heel. We're gonna be turning the rib cage and the shoulders to face the short edge of the mat, but we're keeping this back leg long with the hip open to the side in warrior one. So we've got some tension created here. It is actually kind of a twist because we're open at our hip, but yet our torso is facing forward. Now, if you're pregnant, this isn't actually great for that pregnant belly. So if that's the case, let's switch to lunge. But for the rest of us, we're in warrior one. If this bothers your arms, to have them lifted, you can come into cactus arms or have them at heart center. But if we're able to lift them, don't just bring your arms up. Reaching towards heaven as we have the feet plugged in towards the floor, making sure that we're pressing into the right foot as equally as the left foot. We've got all four corners of the feet plugged in. We're not leaning to any of the edges. Reaching up as we ground. We're always talking about dynamic tension, how we're reaching in two different directions. And here it's a full tension where we've got the fingertips all the way to the toes, creating this tension of reaching in two different directions as we ground down and we reach up. If we peek down, we should be able to see the big toe. We do want to point that knee towards the second toe to protect our MCL. Standing tall as a child of God, we've got a fierce protector in our shepherd. Let's take our hands down towards the mat, coming into a modified standing split. Now take a peek at your foot behind you. Let's make sure that those toes are facing downward. In this particular pose, the torso is close to that leg. So we're not reaching up parallel to the floor. We're actually kind of hugging that leg. In fact, if you want to modify, you can drop that leg. But if you want to advance, you can challenge yourself with some balance by wrapping the hands around that leg. Ooh, not me today. And you can take that leg as high as your mobility allows. But do try to keep that toe facing downward on the rear leg. And then we're going to drop that right leg, making sure that we've got the feet underneath of the hips, soft knees. Then we're going to come into a variation of the forward fold called hang knot. Let's take that right hand to the outside of the left hand to the outside of the right leg, and then just hang. So we get a little bit more of a stretch to the back here. We feel a little more openness between those shoulder blades. Head hanging down, tailbone high. Breathing. And then we can just release the hands, switching. Which arm is on top? And we can release those. Inhaling up, exhaling forward fold. Stepping back with that left foot. Coming once again into warrior one, this time on the other side. Arms overhead, unless you need that modification where we bring them either to heart center or to cactus arms. But if we're able to bring them overhead, let's feel those arms by the ears. We want to make sure that we've got a pretty natural tilt of the pelvis here. We've got an openness of the hip to the side, but our rib cage and our shoulders are squaring forward, lifting those arms as we plug that foot into the mat. So one of the first poses a lot of people learn, whether you're an advanced yogi or if you're new to yoga, you've probably heard of warrior one. This is it. It's a pose of strength, of confidence. And now we can take those hands down to the mat, lifting that left leg behind us. Again, taking a peek to make sure that those toes are pointed down, allowing for that bend in the leg, bringing the torso nice and close to that leg, maybe choosing to modify by lowering the leg, and we do want that rear foot to be flexed. Maybe choosing to advance by taking the hands off the floor to the leg, involving some balance, and lifting that leg even higher. Breathing. And let's drop that leg. Let's grab a block. We're going to take our hands down to the block and reverse the wrist position. We do a lot on our wrists in yoga. Maybe you need this block to be higher. Totally fine. Maybe you even don't need the block, in which case you can lift the toes, placing them over the hands, and bringing ourselves down to this nice wrist stretch. Breathing, releasing from the hamstrings. If you feel this in the toe, go back to that block. And we'll release our hands. Let's step back nice and far again with that right foot. Lifting into warrior two. Extending our arms wall to wall. Working all three parts of the deltoid here. Palms down. We want the heel of our front leg to be at about the center of that rear leg. We want our torso to be parallel to the long edge of the mat. We want to have a good bend in this knee, but we want to make sure that the knee doesn't cross over the heel or over the toe, because we want to protect our ACL. And then we protect our MCL by making sure that that toe is reaching, or that knee is reaching towards the second toe. Breathing. Our arms are not just lifted, we're reaching, stretching them apart from each other, wall to wall reach here. Feeling both feet plugged into the mat, right foot, left foot equally, front of the foot, back of the foot, right to left, everything pressing down. Gaze over that middle finger. Torso open to that long edge of the mat. And now we can kick that hip open as we straighten that front leg, keeping a soft knee, taking our palms forward and cartwheeling the arms so that we've got our right arm overhead, our left arm down, breathing and opening that torso towards the long edge of the mat. You want to imagine that if you have a wall behind you, and you can actually do this against a wall, that we're drawing back that shoulder. We want to have as many parts of our body touching that wall as possible. We don't want to be here. We want to be here. Breathing. You might have this feeling that you just want to hit the floor. When you do, you're going to come out of the alignment that you need, where you want to feel like we've got this hip opening up, trying to hit it towards that wall. If you're able to hit all those points and get to the floor, great. If not, your alignment is much more important than reaching a floor. And now let's return to that warrior stance where we put a bend back in the knee, turning that body again towards the long edge of the mat, lifting our left arm overhead. Now the reason that we want this torso turned is because we want the side of the spine to be what we're lengthening here. As we breathe, we want to feel that those vertebrae are getting nice space between them. We're reaching towards the corner of the room. Inhaling and exhaling. So feeling strong in this warrior stance. Both feet plugged into the mat as we reach. Gaze is high. And now let's do any lengthening that we need to do with the legs to try to bring that top of the leg to be pretty parallel to the mat, as long as it doesn't bother your knee. Now we take our left hand down, reaching the right overhead for extended side angle, reaching, creating a nice long line from the fingertips of the right down to the edge of that foot. Now this can be about as much core as you make it. If we lean into this leg with the left arm, probably not going to be a lot of core work happening here. But as you start to release, and if your torso is turned to the side, you're going to start to feel the core work. So this is about as advanced as we come, making sure, again, we've got that openness of the shoulders. What you can do is just kind of start to ease off and work up to that. Let's take our hands down to the mat, pushing back with that left leg, coming back into down dog. We can volley those feet, alternating right and left, pressing the chest towards the top of the legs. And let's come back into plank. Breathing, wrists right underneath of the shoulders. Fighting that gravity that's trying to pull us down by using our core strength. Remember, we always have that option to come to the knee. And let's sit back into child's pose. Taking our hands to the right, drawing that left foot up, framing it, pushing off as we come forward, inhaling up, exhaling forward fold. Let's step back with that left leg, turning it so that the middle of the left foot falls in line with the heel of the right, coming into warrior two on the other side. Opening that torso up to be parallel to the long edge of the mat as best as we can. Taking our gaze over that middle finger, shoulders down, away from the ears. We're working all three parts of the deltoids here, but maybe your shoulders just can't hack this. That's okay. Make sure our alignment is good with the torso. Just drop the arms or bring them to heart center. We want to make sure that that toe is pointing to the second toe. And that we can see our toes. Breathing with an openness as we reach wall to wall. Breathing, 3-part breath. Building from the belly, bottom of the rib cage, top of the chest. Gaze over that middle finger. And then we can straighten out that leg, keeping a little micro bend, taking our arms forward, cartwheeling to draw that left arm overhead, right arm comes down, gaze is straight ahead. Thinking about that imaginary wall behind us and trying to get as much of our body to touch that wall as possible. Open up that torso, making it perpendicular to the floor. Open to the front. Breathing. Let's return to that warrior stance. Resting our left arm on the leg, drawing the right arm overhead, feeling that down the side. Remember, we're not turned towards the short edge, and we're not going to get what we're looking for in the spine. We've got that torso turned towards the long edge of the mat. We're reaching towards the corner of the room. Our gaze is high. Breathing. I'm not using any music in these sessions, partially for trademark reasons, but also so that you can add whatever music you like. If you're looking for a suggestion, Depths of Worship has some nice long songs where you can just turn on one song and it usually lasts the whole session. Pairs nicely with this style of yoga. Now let's lengthen those legs, making sure that we've got them long enough to try to bring that top leg pretty parallel to the floor, wherever your knee allows. Resting that right arm on the leg. Drawing the left over to make a nice line here from the fingertips to the leg. Again, if this bothers your shoulder, just rest it here. Opening up our torso towards that long edge of the mat. Remembering that this can be quite a core exercise if we want it to be, by releasing that arm, maybe even placing it up here. Your choice. And let's take that hand towards the mat, stepping up, inhaling up, hands meet, coming to heart center. Let's just kind of step that out right and left, taking our hands to the hips, doing some circles. Each circle can be a little different. I actually encourage that. Then we're going to stabilize on just the left leg as we move into tree. We're going to take our knee out, taking either the toe to the floor or just below the knee, never at the knee, and I'm also not a fan of bringing it up to the hip. Let's take that right hand, opening up that knee back, then take the left hand, opening that shoulder, and then now that we've got the torso and the legs how we want them, we have a choice here. If we're pregnant or if we have high blood pressure, we want to take our hands either to heart center or we can open up to leaves. And this might feel good to you even if you've got great blood pressure. But we also have an option here to take those arms overhead, reaching upward as a nice tall tree, rooted in the floor. Breathing. Gaze straight ahead. Now, if you're falling out of this pose, good news. You've found that place that challenges you and changes you. When something feels easy, it doesn't change us. It means we haven't quite found that place where we can become better than we already are, stronger than we already are. So it's good news. Just get right back in the pose and keep going. And let's step that out, noticing the difference between how we feel on the right and the left. And we're going to stabilize on the right foot. Drawing up that left leg, either with the toe to the floor or just under the knee. Take that hand, draw that knee just to open it up a little bit. Take your right hand, opening up the shoulder, then choosing either heart center, open leaves, or overhead. Finding a focal point, keeping that breath nice and steady, deep, long. Think about all the strengthening that we're doing to that standing leg. It is winter in Wisconsin and there will be ice. And when we strengthen all those little muscles of the legs, it's going to help us catch ourselves before we fall. Muscles that we don't always think about. You go in, you work your glutes, you work your quads. But do you think about your peroneus brevis? There are so many muscles in our legs that help us stabilize and balance. And this is going to help us strengthen those too, in addition to our feet. Try to practice your yoga barefoot if you can. It's going to help you create a nice foundation. It's also going to help to strengthen your feet. We are in shoes way too much. And let's release that. Stepping it out, inhaling up, exhaling, forward fold. We're going to come down to the knees as we come into camel. I'm going to come just almost backwards to you so that you can see I'm making a fist, placing them right here. Then we're going to take our hips, pushing them forward, taking our shoulders, rounding them back to open up the chest, taking our gaze high, but again, being careful not to hyperextend the neck. Don't let it hang down. That puts you at a risk for a stroke. Let's not have a stroke. And then we can stay here if this is feeling like it's opening up our chest, or if you'd like to advance this, just repeat everything, drawing those hips forward again, rolling the shoulders back and down, maybe even coming back to find your heels, keeping that chest nice and open, neck engaged, gaze up. We're not just dropping that neck. Maybe feeling like you've got a grapefruit between your chin and your chest. Definitely like there's an egg behind your neck that you don't want to break. Breathing. Feeling this openness in the chest that's going to reverse all the damage we do as we're sitting over our computers, our phones, our books, driving a car. Lots of back extension. Pressing those hips forward. Open hip flexors. Let's take our gaze forward, relaxing the hands, taking the hands to front. That was a lot of extension. So let's come into a child's pose, which is a great time also to return to prayer. We're going to come into a time of what we call supplication, which just means we're going to pray for those requests that are on your heart. Drop the head down. Maybe you have a friend going through something, pray for them. Maybe you are going through something and you don't know what to do. Don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Philippians 4:8. Pray about it. Let's come into that time. While we were here, we found some neutral in the back. Let's come back up to a seated position. I'm going to face you again. We're going to take our right leg, drawing it underneath of us. If you're able, bring that knee to face forward. Then take your left over the top, sitting tall. Now maybe you can't come this far around and still sit tall. Make any adjustments that you need to do. We do want this foot to be flat because it's actually going to be our foundation. Spine nice and tall. Take that right hand, wrapping it around the left. And then it's really important when we rotate that we always rotate from a straight spine. We don't want to be in flexion and then rotate. So nice and tall, and then we rotate back. Now as we rotate, we want to try to have that all be happening from the core. So every time we exhale is another opportunity to deepen this, but let's try to do that from the belly button. We don't want it just to happen with the arm. I know we are kind of using it to hold ourselves together here. Also, we're always thinking about where's the foundation of our pose? Where are we pressing in? You might think it's the tailbone, but you might be wrong. It's actually that foot. So we're pressing that foot into the mat, crown of the head lifted, gaze behind us, but that rotation is active in our core, in the belly. Feel that belly working here. Pressing it towards the back of the mat, maybe a little more with each exhale. And then we can release that forward. Let's take that top leg and come here. Flexed feet to protect the tissues under the knees. We're gonna take our hands to heart center and just kind of hinge forward here. Feeling a nice stretch of the hips. And then let's come up. Let's switch this out. We're going to draw the left leg underneath of us, flex foot again. Drawing that right foot over the top, sitting tall, taking that left arm, wrapping it, sitting tall, and then rotating behind us. Every exhale, that opportunity to deepen this rotation, going just a little bit further, but trying to make the core do that work. Not muscling it with the arm, even though we are using it for some support. Pressing that foot into the mat, that one that we're flat-footed with. Breathing into this twist. We're bringing out the abdominal organs. And coming forward, seeing if we're able to stack knee on top of knee, flex feet, hands to heart center, bending forward. Not gonna stay here long. Now let's open up those legs to butterfly, sitting to the front of the tailbone, actively drawing those knees down towards the mat. And then it's really important that we do this with a straight spine. We're not trying to draw the head towards the feet. We're trying to draw the chest towards the floor. And then if you'd like, you can place a block here. Once we've got that straight spot of the spine. If you'd like to work on your ankle flexibility here, we can open up those feet like the pages of a book. Breathing, finding an openness here. Everybody varies quite a bit in butterfly, and it isn't a skill thing quite often. It's just the position of our hips. The biggest indicator of our hips is really gender related. If you're a man or a woman, women are going to have hips that are made to bear children. And so they have a little bit easier time in this pose. So don't beat yourself up, which I don't want you to do anyway in a pose. But find that place where you are, where you feel a stretch without pain. And let's be in that place. Lengthening. And we can come back up. We're going to come into a seated straddle, opening up the legs. Sing again to the front of the tailbone. And again, we're not drawing the head down. We've got a nice straight spine, and we're coming down. We can use a block to find that place where we are. Feeling a good stretch. We want the feet to be flexed. You'll notice we're different in poses from day to day. Monday, you might feel really flexible. Tuesday, not so much. We just find that place where we are. Breathing. And we can lift out of this. Now you might not do yoga every day, but boy, I would encourage you to at least try to do some breath work every day, like your 3-part breath. And also, legs up the wall. If you can do 10 minutes a day, we're not going to do 10 minutes here. We don't have that kind of time. But I'm going to read a little meditation to you while we're in legs up the wall. If you have a wall, you can just turn to face the wall, kick your legs up the wall. But if you don't have a wall like me, you can use a yoga strap. You want to have it nice and tight. We're going to wrap it around the torso, taking it right underneath of the arms. Then we're going to take a foot, pressing up, finding a place where it's nice and taut, and then come back. Placing the other foot in, you want this to be tight enough that those feet can just really rest. This is a restorative pose. Restorative yoga is different than the other kinds of yoga that we've been doing today because it's not about reaching, stretching, rotating. It's about letting go. The more we can let go in a restorative pose, the more effective it's going to be. I've got a little meditation here from Psalm 23. I love this chapter so much. And I think part of the reason that I like it so much is that when I was a little girl, my grandpa was a pastor of a church in Iowa. And at the very front of this church was a huge stained glass window. And on the stained glass window was Jesus depicted with a sheep in his arms. This is how I remember it anyway. And some sheep all around him. It was as Jesus the Good Shepherd. Psalm 23 revolves around the first 5 words, the Lord is my shepherd. And these are words that didn't just mean something to me as a kid. I mean, through the ages, Psalm 23 has been a comforting passage of scripture to people who were in anxiety by a hospital bed of a loved one, by soldiers on the battlefield, at funerals when we're just wrecked with grief. But Psalm 23 is not a chapter that was written just for us when we're feeling vulnerable and in pain. Psalm 23 has something to offer us in the everyday. It offers us confidence. It offers us guidance for the decisions that we make. God will direct us in paths of righteousness, and it gives us peace. Most of us have been raised far from farm life, and we picture sheep as cute and cuddly, snowy white animals. But the perspective of a sheep farmer would be quite different. They know sheep to be dirty, filthy animals that constantly wind up in predicaments that show just how vulnerable they are. Sheep are easily rattled and in need of peace, just like us. Most farm animals exist pretty well without human supervision. For example, what do you call someone who shepherds chickens? There's no name for that. Chickens don't need a shepherd, neither do horses or cows, but sheep, they get a shepherd because they need one. Without a shepherd, sheep will wander off and get into all kinds of potentially fatal situations. They can even get into trouble right where they are. In the winter, their fleece will get really heavy, and the sheep just might tip over. This can also happen if they're pregnant or if they're lying on their side and they tip over. And much like a tortoise, they don't have the ability to roll themselves back over. A sheep will die if they're left too long. Internal gases will build up, and they have an inability to breathe properly. It's a critical situation, and the sheep needs to be flipped over as soon as possible to prevent potential death. They need a shepherd, making sheep a perfect image for Psalm 23. David didn't write this psalm for the self-sufficient. It's a psalm for people who know that they need guidance, and people who are willing to look to the humble, great, or people who are willing to look humbly to the great shepherd. Shepherd is a fitting title when we think of what Jesus did for us. He took on the filth of our sin, something he didn't deserve, coming to earth as a baby, born into the humblest of circumstances. Psalm 23 is personal. It's not a passage that holds God at an arm's length. Psalm 23:1 doesn't say that the Lord is a shepherd. It doesn't even say that the Lord is our shepherd. It says the Lord is my shepherd. David's culture didn't value individualism like we do today. It was a culture of community. And when you look at sheep, they're never by themselves. They're always in a flock. So why would David decide to say that the Lord is my shepherd, using that personal term? Because he knew his value to the great shepherd. He knew that we have a shepherd who loves us. In this crowded world where we're pulled back and forth, our shepherd will not let us go. There isn't a valley that we walk through that our shepherd goes through at first, protecting us all the way through. Our shepherd ensures that we lack nothing we need, we shall not want. He calls us away from our tendency to exhaust ourselves in the rat race of this life to rest, leading us beside still waters, in green pastures, restoring our soul. And now we can take those legs out of the strap. We can set that strap aside. We're going to rock on our backs, back and forth, feeling a little bit of a back massage. And then let's return that left foot to the mat, drawing that right over the top, coming into a supine pigeon. We want a flexed foot here. We're going to take that right hand, pressing that knee away from us, feeling the sensation that brings to our hip. Make sure that foot is flexed to protect the tissues of the knee. And then we're going to come into this pose just a little bit deeper as we draw this towards us. We can release that supporting knee. Now we want to feel this in the hip. We don't want to feel it in the knee. So maybe we're here. That's okay. Maybe we're here and we can take it into our hand. Maybe we even need to keep it just on the knee. Or you can advance by taking it into the crook of the elbow. Just make sure that we keep that foot flexed, that we're feeling this in the hip. We can come into a sinking breath here. We inhale deeply, and as we exhale, we just sink a little bit deeper into this pose. Releasing this just a little bit, and then we can rotate the net ball and socket of the hip. Reverse that. And then we'll return that foot to the mat. Let's cross the left foot over the right. Once again, we take that hand, pressing the leg away, noticing that sensation, keeping a flexed foot. And then we can either stay here if we're feeling a good stretch, or take that foot into the hand, or maybe choose to bring that into the crook of the elbow. Breathing, inhaling deeply, exhaling as we sink. And we can release that slightly, making sure that this rock and roll motion is not happening in the knee, but that it is happening in the ball and socket of the hip. Rolling that out the other way. Releasing that. Let's bring up both legs, bringing them to a 90-degree angle, rolling over to the side, making sure that we have ankle on ankle, knee on knee, hip on hip, then taking our left arm out to the side, allowing our gaze to follow, and then squaring those shoulders. We can tiptoe them out, trying to drop both shoulders towards the mat, and then supine twist. Sinking breath again, inhaling, sinking deeper into this pose as we exhale. You might find you can twist a little bit more the longer you're here, and you can just walk those shoulders out. Releasing the hands, using them to guide our knees back to the chest. We rock that out. Rolling to the left, the other side, knee on knee, ankle on ankle, hip on hip, drawing our right arm open to the right, left arm to the left, squaring out those shoulders, trying to have the upper body as much to the mat as we can, taking our gaze to those fingertips. Inhaling, sinking as we exhale. Returning our gaze to center, using those hands to guide those legs back up, knees to chest, rocking that out, finding neutral in the back after this rotation again, moving into our final relaxation, extending the legs. When we think about Psalm 23, one of the verses says, "He makes me to lie down in green pastures." Isn't it funny how we long and long for rest, and yet we sometimes need to be made to rest? So give yourself permission here for rest. Many times through scripture, God commands rest, or he calls us to be still. And that's all we're doing here. Taking our last purposeful breath of today, inhaling deeply, exhaling fully, and then just letting our breath become natural, nothing forced. Softening the shoulders, allowing them to sink into the floor. Softening the neck, the back of the head. Doing any wiggling you need to do to find stillness, and then just completely letting go. Softening the jaw, cheekbones, space under the eyes, those crinkles where we smile. Allowing the softness to stretch all the way across the top of the head. Maybe there's something you're carrying today. Imagine just letting it go. Heart keeping open. Noticing the front of the heart and the back of the heart. Allowing the right arm to feel heavy and the left. Finding an openness in both palms of the hands. Noticing the strength of the rib cage. Allowing those hips to sink into the floor. Noticing the top of the right leg, the top of the left leg, back of both legs. Allowing the softness to circle over the right ankle, the left ankle, the top of the left foot, the top of the right foot. Any last bit of tension, just send it out the feet. And now we can take a more purposeful breath, wiggling the fingers and toes, drawing those knees back in towards the chest, using that toe to rock ourselves back up to a seated position.